Oh my god. Who did that? I think that literally made the mic peak. Holy shit. I don't even know where they come from sometimes. Like, I didn't even just drink anything carbonated. Hey, you there. Yes, you. Have you been personally victimized by Mariah Carey screeching in every local grocery store? Have your eyes been assaulted by the year's most tacky decorations? You and your loved ones might be entitled to some really good horror content to help mitigate those side effects. Yeah, the Halloween vibes absolutely never die on this channel. Maybe I should get like a spooky little Christmas tree or something for my desk. So if you like things spooky year-round, then click subscribe, hang around, because I have a lot of other good horror content on this channel too. Now that you've joined my cult, I'm just gonna need you to make a blood oath, and then we'll be in business. That's a joke, I have to be clear. You know that's right, okay. Today we'll be talking about every movie that I watched in the month of November. If you haven't been around for one of these videos before, this is how I do it. First, I'll go over all the TV shows that I watched in the month. Of course, this will include Chucky and Wednesday. Next, I'll go over all the non-horror movies that I watched, and this includes a lot of new releases this month, like The Banshees of Inisherin and Wakanda Forever. After that, I'll touch on all the horror movies that I've rewatched this month. That includes quite a few actually, like 1408, Devil, all the Friday the 13th movies. Next up will be new watches of old horror. What am I finally getting caught up on? Finally, what you'll all be waiting for, I'll go over all the new horror movie releases of the month. If you're antsy to get to that point, there will be timestamps linked down below in the description box. Let's start out with the TV shows. Now, I was going to do a very thorough plot breakdown and review on the entirety of Chucky season 2, but I did just do a 2-hour-long live stream with Ken and Ashley Sledge from Sledgehammer Horror, and I do think that I've exhausted pretty much everything that I could possibly talk about during that live stream about season 2. But I understand a lot of people are not fans of going back and watching the replay of a live stream, so I'll include all my spoiler-free thoughts here. Child's Play is one of my favorite horror franchises of all time, so I relish whenever I get to talk about some of my favorite villains and their antics. But this season got real weird. It's the weirdest bit of Chucky content that I think exists, and that's saying something because Seed of Chucky also exists. I did make the prediction that the acting would get better, and it did. There no longer seems to be quite the issue of the Jake face as I had coined it back in the day. This kid was going through it. I feel for his circumstances, I really do, but I did not like him. And I think it's literally just the faces that he was making. It made me so frustrated because all of these crazy events were going on and happening around him, happening to him, but he reacted the same exact way every single time. He has one mode, and it's that issue is more or less a thing of the past. I felt pretty engrossed by the kids acting now. So that's the first positive, and the second being that they brought back Devon Sawa as a new character. Spoiler for the first season, but they had killed him off. Twice. And now he's back as this priest for this school of troubled youths. Of course, they're very self-aware of this in kind of the best way. There's some good ironic dialogue, and I love him as an actor. He is one of my favorites of all time. So he's great, and his character has by far the best arc of the entire season. Also, Glenn/Glenda, played by Lachlan Watson, perfection. I also like the location of this season. I think that there was a lot of potential there, and I enjoy the concept of this season as a concept. In execution, we have some things to discuss. Unfortunately, that'll start here because I just have a lot of negatives about this season. Now, I want to preface that I'll still watch season 3. It doesn't really matter how bad the show gets because I just love Chucky so much. I'll keep watching until the wheels fall off. That being said, it's really, really hard for me to not enjoy myself while watching a bit of Chucky content, and they managed to do that a couple times during this season. So kind of along with that, my second negative about the show is the consistency of quality. The first episode didn't really interest me despite raising a pretty burning question, and then the second episode I was super excited about. I thought it was great. Following that, episode 3 was weird, but I was like, okay. Episode 4 is the hottest garbage of this entire franchise. Please believe me when I say this. I think I've only had one person leave a comment here and there saying that they actually really enjoyed the diversion that this episode took. Personally, I found it insufferable, save for a few pretty iconic moments. Then episode 5 was much better, episode 6 was bad, episode 7 was pretty fantastic, and then the finale, you get it. I was on a roller coaster with this season. I think it has something to do with how they structured the B-plots in each episode. It was really messy. Some episodes only follow the kids at school, some episodes only follow Tiffany and company, and then some episodes would do something very strange. In episode 6, for example, you're only following the children save for one scene with a few of the legacy characters. It really just kind of feels thrown in there. The structure of the buildup of these separate plots that you know must converge at some point is so bizarre. I think the difference between this season and season 1 is how much of a disconnect I feel between the separate plots now. In season 1, I definitely felt like everything was building to a big crescendo, and everyone kind of found each other at appropriate times to build the tension. This season, everyone is all over the place story-wise, franchise, and it's a pretty frustrating experience. Now, this next gripe is probably my biggest one that I've ever had with this franchise. The dropped plot threads of this season drove me up the fucking wall. They would introduce this potentially high-stakes, really interesting conflict, and then it would be resolved within another episode, or sometimes in the same episode. Sometimes it would be more menial things, like killing off a secondary antagonist, and then sometimes they're setting up what you believe to be maybe the titular villain of the entire season that's leading up to the finale, and then that plotline is killed within the same episode. I could not believe how many times they did this, and to top it all off, the finale was garbage. Season 2 suffers from obvious plans for a season 3 rather than being its own well-contained story. The finale of season 1 is so great, so big and climactic, and then the ending of season 2 just fizzles out, it like limps across the finish line. It's a bad season. I'm pretty comfortable saying that. The story needs so much more attention, particularly with the legacy characters. No more filler Don Mancini, no more. No more sacrificial lamb characters, no more just sprinkling in the legacy characters for decoration. I still await season 3, I'm gonna watch it, but now the bar has just been set really low for my expectations. So moving on, next up, I watched Big Mouth season 6. This show is old, you probably don't need a synopsis, but I kinda shamelessly love this show. The last few seasons have been kinda bad, but it's still doing really important educational things. Like this last season had a whole episode about vagina shame and covered a whole bunch of typically kind of taboo topics surrounding that. I wish I had this show growing up. It's definitely made me a little bit more comfortable with some of my body's own functions. But I need to move on to one of the best releases of the entire year, horror or not. Wednesday. Yeah, you already knew. While attending the Nevermore Academy, Wednesday Addams attempts to master her emerging psychic abilities by solving a current murder spree and unraveling a mystery from her parents' past. This is the best show of the year. I love it even more than Sandman and Stranger Things, and that's no small feat. The production design, bitch. The world building, the creatures and critters, the color palette, ooh. And let me get this out of the way because this is what everyone's thinking. Jenna Ortega, please. She redefined the meaning of subtle acting. Oh, I just hit you. I'm sorry. You are a plant. Wednesday is a character that really struggles with emotion, and she never really expresses it. So when she's happy, she barely kind of smiles with her eyes, and maybe the corners of her mouth will just ever so slightly turn up. This also made her super emotional moments that much more serious, because then the icy cover would slip and she'd really be emoting and you're like, oh god. There's this wonderful other character named Enid, and she's not really my type, but I realized that she is exactly like my best friend Leanne. If you didn't know, Leanne is my Scottish girlfriend. She has her own horror channel, but she hasn't posted over there in a long time. We basically just have the opposite aesthetics to each other, and she is much more bright and bubbly, and I'm much more toned down, kind of like Wednesday. And she sent me this adorable drawing of the two of them, and she's like, oh my god, this is literally us. It's completely true, down to the aesthetics and personality and everything, which I just thought was really cute. Anyway, Enid and Wednesday are just kind of the definition of opposites attracting, and it's exemplified in everything from like the set design to the wardrobe. It's fantastic. The love interests in this show are also really interesting because I read Wednesday as gay. She's super emotionless, but seems especially disinterested in the men who are interested in her, so I'm like, are we gonna explore that in season 2? I'm thinking about hosting a spoiler chat of Wednesday in the near future, so let me know if you're interested in that down below. And if you're watching from the future, maybe I already did it and you can find it in the live tab of my channel. I'll just leave it at the fact that somehow this show made me want to go back to college and live in dorms. Like, what? But I want to go to Nevermore. Why don't they have this shit for adults? I want to go live somewhere weird and meet interesting, cool new people. I guess I could just move closer to the city, but Hollywood is gross. And real life grad school is awful. Why can't I just live inside Tim Burton's brain? But it's real weird in there. Anyway, the very last show that I watched isn't really much of a show. I Am Groot is a new series on Disney Plus that has actually been renewed for a season 2. It's just 5 different 5-minute long short films where Groot gets himself into all sorts of hijinks. It's a hoot. Obviously not much to say there, so that'll do it for all the TV shows that I watched. Now moving on to all the non-horror movies that I watched. Last month, I made it a point to kind of get out of my horror comfort zone and watch more dramas because I am just a movie fan in general. I don't just love horror, I love all film, and sometimes I kind of forget that there are so many other movies on my watch list that are non-horror that I want to get to. So in the beginning of the month, I made sure to get out and see a lot of movies that have been on my watch list for a very long time. The first one, not so much, but that would be Ticket to Paradise, a brand new rom-com. This is the new enemies to lovers tale starring Julia Roberts and George Clooney, where they travel to Bali to stop their daughter's hasty marriage. This movie's pretty corny, but you can't really deny the charm of Julia Roberts and George Clooney. My problem is just that it was so formulaic and predictable, and I would love for rom-coms to make a comeback, but this just wasn't it. Unfortunately, the ones that have come out in theaters this year just have no originality to them, and this one felt so generic that it was obviously just a paid vacation for the cast and crew. Definitely a nice little piece of escapism, but I just couldn't help but be jealous about the fact that these mega rich movie stars got to go to this beautiful place for months on end for free. Especially Billie Lourd, and her character does nothing, she's literally just there for the ride. But I did recommend it to my parents because I knew that they would like it, and my dad did in fact cry for about the last 45 minutes of the movie. I'm not exaggerating, that guy's a real softie. The next movie that I watched was much more interesting. That would be Weird, the Al Yankovic story. This is the totally, completely true telling of the story of Weird Al Yankovic's rise to fame, starring Daniel Radcliffe. This movie is a complete parody on literally every biopic to ever exist, and I don't think that there could have been a more perfect team of people to make this movie. Daniel Radcliffe as Weird Al, perfection. I've said this more times than I can count, so I'm sorry if you've already heard me say this, but the fact that Daniel Radcliffe made all the money he would ever need by age 12, and so now he goes on to do the weirdest shit that he possibly can, we have to applaud. No, we have to. They made this movie for only $8 million, which is insane when you consider all the cameos. I want to list them, but I'm obviously not going to spoil the movie, and they provide some of the best jokes. I'll just say my favorite one was at the pool party scene, and we'll leave it at that. For the first 30 to 40 minutes, I thought that I was watching a perfect film. I was having a grand old time. I was busting up laughing by myself. Yes, I had taken an edible. What does that matter? And then the movie hits a total wall when they fabricate this fake story about Weird Al having a relationship with Madonna. Side note, the people that made this movie must really not be fans of Madonna because they depicted the relationship as being very, very toxic. But the movie never recovers from this. I kind of stopped laughing and I started checking the time because this movie is an hour and 45 minutes long. So just manage your expectations a little bit. It's not going to be fantastic all throughout, but just enjoy the ride for what it is while you can. Who knew that a Roku original would be that good anyways? Like, what? I definitely still recommend that one, but moving on now to Triangle of Sadness. Triangle of Sadness follows a model and his influencer girlfriend on their luxury yacht experience. When I tell you bonkers, hear me when I say this. This movie is wild. It's undoubtedly one of the wackiest movies I watched in this last month, and I just finished telling you about Weird, the Al Yankovic story. This is a mild spoiler, mild, and I think that you'll thank me for telling you that there is an insurmountable amount of vomit in this movie, and a lot of poop too. However much vomit you're thinking of right now, I guarantee you it's more. Consider bringing a barf bag. It might be a crucial move on your part. Or finish all your popcorn by the time Act 1 is over, just trust me, because then you'll have a bucket, so it's a built-in barf bag. You get it. I'm surprised that more people were getting sick and Terrifier 2 than they were in this movie. But it's also a movie about living in society, which we do. It has the exact same energy as Parasite, which is always a good sign. But ultimately, the movie just wasn't really for me. A lot of the comedy was so dry that I didn't laugh. It's clever though. It's a very smart film that plays with the dynamics of the class system. Despite not liking the movie, I can't deny that it is pretty excellent, so I did still give it 4 out of 5 stars. If you're going to see it though, don't drink too much liquid beforehand, because this shit is long. Anyway, after that would be another critical darling, The Banshees of Inisherin. On a remote island off the coast of Ireland, Padraig, I have no idea how to say that name. Colin Farrell's character, okay, he's devastated when his buddy Colin suddenly puts an end to their lifelong friendship. With help from his sister and a troubled young islander, he sets out to repair the relationship by any means necessary. Again, we have a movie where I can recognize it as a strong film, but it's definitely not for me. It's definitely not as good as Triangle of Sadness, I can tell that much, but a lot of people are eating this movie up, so maybe you like it more than I did. I have a suspicion this movie is made for like old ladies, because there was a pair of them in my row in the theater and they were busting up. I thought the attempts at humor were pretty abysmal, except for a few jokes that did land for me. I think the reason it didn't connect for me is because the premise is really absurd. The interaction that happens between these men to cause the rift is just, I don't know, I don't really buy it. I don't buy a lot of what happens in the movie because it gets surprisingly wild at times, and I felt like it was just too much of a contrast to the uber serious tone they were trying to have. It takes place in, I think, the 1910s in like war-torn UK. It's very depressing. The entire atmosphere of the movie feel so serious, except for some of the comedy, which like I said was bad. And it also didn't connect with me because it is a breakup story and I just don't feel like there's really a lesson to be learned there. Some people should definitely break up, and that's all the movie is saying, really. Like, don't hold on to toxic relationships. So saying that out loud, okay, some people do need to see this movie, but I also don't feel like it had any business being 2 hours long. It is kind of just a slice of life movie. There's not a lot of plot going on, but I'm gonna have to eat my words in a few months when it's nominated for Best Picture. Next up, we have Shiva Baby, which is a 2020 release that I regretfully missed. Shiva Baby follows Danielle at a funeral with her parents where she runs into an ex-girlfriend and her sugar daddy. This movie is literally the definition of bi panic, and I need you to understand that. It stars Rachel Sennett from Bodies, 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 and this woman deserves her own multiverse of madness. It has a really stacked cast though. That girl from Good Boys, whose name I don't remember, and Miss Quinn Fabray, again, I don't know the actress's name, but Quinn. Her parents are also played by those 2 actors that you know, and the movie comes in at a crisp hour and 18 minutes long. It is perfect. Also directed by a queer woman, very ideal. Just overall a good time because the main character is such a mess, but she's a mess in a very empathetic way. In a way that makes me feel like I'm not alone in this world. I don't know why this movie didn't make a bigger commotion when it came out, but you can watch it on HBO Max now. And I highly recommend it. You already know that Rachel Sennett is hilarious, and in this movie she's gay, so it was the 20-something coming of age story that I didn't know I needed. I don't even know if it was really meant to be a coming of age story, but that's how it hit me. Whatever, just go watch it. And another movie that you absolutely need to watch is Glass Onion, a Knives Out sequel. Benoit Blanc is back at it again, solving the mystery of another group of wealthy assholes. It was the most random thing. I was all geared up and ready to go to this early screening of The Menu, and who should ring me up with an extra ticket but Matthew Patrick Davis to an Academy screening of this movie? And there was a panel with Ryan Johnson, Edward Norton, Janelle Monáe, Kate Hudson, Katherine Hahn, Jessica Henwick, and Madeline Klein. Oh my lord, I was gripped. I was hanging on to every last word. What an incredible cast of people, and the way that they play off each other on screen is magic. It's a tangible movie magic that runs in these actors' blood, and so putting them all in one movie together with the writing and directing of Ryan Johnson, oh my god. If you've seen the first Knives Out, I think this one might be even better. The characters in the original are also very strong, and they're even more beefed up in this sequel. It's not cartoonish, but the characters are just really strong, you feel me? It's grand though, it's very over the top, and in the wise words of Harry Styles, it is a movie that feels like a movie. I am pissed that this franchise was bought by Netflix because I saw this movie in a theater with hundreds of people and the energy cannot be matched. People were clapping, dying, laughing. The communal experience of that is something you can't really put a price tag on. But Netflix just hates streaming so goddamn much that of course they blew their shot at making hundreds of millions of dollars with this movie and already pulled it out of theaters. Boo! Boo! Netflix, you suck! Just kidding, sponsor me. And on this panel, when Ryan Johnson was asked if Knives Out 3 was happening, he was like, yes, and this is what it's all about. It's all about the community and the theater experience. He told us that he came into the room at one point during the screening just to feel the energy of everyone, and he said that that is why he does what he does. So this might be the best movie release of the entire year, and that is not hyperbole. Rich people are in their flop era, and I am sitting back with my popcorn and eating it the fuck up. Not gonna say anything else. I don't want to spoil anything about the movie. Just watch it. Anyway, moving on, I rewatched Black Panther. Almost an entirely perfect movie except for the "what are those" line, because whose idea was that?
The real question is, what are those?
Other than that, definitely the best movie in the entire MCU. Yeah, I said what I said. Now, Wakanda Forever, on the other hand. This follows Wakanda in the aftermath of the loss of King T'Challa. Shuri and Queen Rwanda also must deal with the conflict of a new rival, Namor, a mutant from an underwater kingdom who threatens global war. So this movie asks a lot of the audience, and I don't know how much better they could have done given the circumstances, but I don't think the movie is very good. I gave it 3.5 stars, which is not bad, but it needs some work. It very much feels like they had a great script there and then tragically had to adapt after the sudden loss of Chadwick Boseman. I've listened to some podcasts on it. A really good one would be The Big Picture. They did an episode on it, but I think that it was in that episode where they brought in a guest who said that he wished that they had recast Black Panther. No. This is why I think they did the best they could with what they had. All the Marvel characters are so insanely synonymous with the actors that play them that there's no way that they could recast Chadwick. They could nab another Black Panther from the multiverse where his universe exploded or something like that, and maybe he would look a little bit different, but he still wouldn't have been our T'Challa. So even in doing that, they would still have to add the whole grief subplot. But this movie is trying to be anti-colonialist, introduce 2 new recurring MCU characters, one of which is from an entire new underwater kingdom, deal with grief and death, take Shuri on a new character arc, prevent a global war. It's too much. It's too much. It's so bloated. Not to mention a lot of the writing is so terrible. A lot of it is in the vein of this new comedic style they want to take with the MCU. Just the cringiest boomer humor where you feel like you're watching an SNL sketch. I feel like it's an insult to the audience's intelligence, because what happened to subtle humor? They're basically turning every character into a recycled version of Tony Stark. And the situations in the movie are so serious that I was getting whiplash going back and forth from crying to cringing in my chair. I guess Marvel's humor has never exactly been subtle, but at least a lot of it was really improvisational. Like, a lot of Guardians of the Galaxy was improvised, but the humor in Wakanda Forever, ooh, it feels painfully written. Other reviewers, like On the Big Picture, have made the note that this movie has really good bookends that deal with the loss of the Black Panther, but everything in the middle is just bloated mess. Another smaller note before I move on, in the nighttime scenes, was I the only one who couldn't see what was going on? I was in a theater, the best place to absorb all the visuals of the movie, and some scenes were so dark, I was like, I can't see. Anyway, not one that I'm likely to revisit. It was so bloated, sensory overload, so long. But next up will be more Marvel, the Guardians of the Galaxy Holiday Special. This was okay. I think I gave it 3 stars. The best part of this by far is that Kevin Bacon plays himself and he references his role in Friday the 13th. I only recommend this to Marvel fans. It's nothing special, but it's fun. Lastly, I also watched the making of Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness and the making of Thor: Love and Thunder. If you're a horror fan, you should definitely watch the making of Doctor Strange because Bruce Campbell hosts it. I just love making of documentaries, and especially the assembled Marvel ones, because a lot of the technology they use these days is insane. But that will finally do for all my non-horror watches of the month. Sorry for my horror babes in the audience. This is also just a time of year where I watch a lot of non-horror stuff because I'm spending so much time with family, so bear with me. Let's chat some horror now and get into all of my horror rewatches of the month. I rewatched Trick or Treat. I watched it the day after Halloween because I was just very much still in the mood. I love the vibes of this movie, and the best story by a mile is the one that takes place in the forest. Not gonna spoil it because it kind of has one of the best twists of the whole movie. It's just a good time with Lil Sam as well, and I'm really excited that Michael Dougherty has just announced that they're working on a sequel. I also rewatched Almost Every Friday Movie, and that was kind of a slog, but we are gonna do a ranking of that together very soon. And I have a little something special planned for this month too, so keep an eye out. My next rewatch would be 1408, a movie that I think I saw for the first time when I was about 11. This follows a hack author who travels to various haunted locations and writes about the true crime events that took place there. He's extremely skeptical until he meets his match, room 1408. This movie is really good. I only had to dox at some points because the third act gets really messy, but I loved it. Sam Jackson and John Cusack are fantastic. I love their dynamic together. I watched the behind the scenes features on my new Blu-ray of it, and according to Sam Jackson, Cusack plays every single take a little bit differently. It's a contrast to Jackson's style because he plays every take pretty much exactly the same. There are definitely benefits to both because on the one hand you have a lot of consistency, which is really beneficial, and then on the other you have a lot of fun options to play with in the edit. It's also amazing how they made this movie and the stages that they built for all these insane, massive practical water effects. This movie just has such a good build-up. The first 2 acts I think are incredible, and then in the third act it's a little bit much. Things get extremely surreal, which is okay, but it just goes on for a little bit too long, so I get a little bit fatigued by the antics. But I think the ending is really strong, so that saves it for me too. Highly recommend if you've never seen it. And speaking of early 2000s horror, Devil is another one that I rewatched from 2010. Devil follows a group of strangers who get trapped in an elevator together and the police detectives that are trying desperately to solve the harrowing mystery that's unfolding between them. I love this movie. I don't even care. It's rated pretty badly, whatever. I liked it. It's like I somehow forgot how much I love early 2000s horror. I haven't watched any of it in such a long time. And I watched both of these last 2 with my dad, so if you want to hear our thoughts together about it, it, we did talk about it in our last live stream. It's goofy, sometimes very predictable, but I enjoyed myself a lot. It has this really dark opening that sets the tone, and then that's maintained by the claustrophobia of the elevator. I think the story is also genuinely compelling because even when it's sometimes really predictable or corny, it's still really interesting. Produced by Shyamalan, so you know that there's a good little twist. It's just a good popcorn flick. And again, a tight hour and 22 minutes, I think. Lovely. Sinister, on the other hand, not so much of a popcorn flick. Probably don't need a synopsis for this one. I still like this movie. I gave it 4 stars. I think story-wise, it's very effective, and I simp for Ethan Hawke. He is one of, if not my favorite actor of all time. But upon a rewatch, when I'm almost 3 years deep into professionally reviewing horror movies, I realize it's not as scary as I thought it was. Maybe I've been desensitized, or maybe I just realize now how cliche a lot of the stuff that happens in the movie is. I still enjoy the movie, but I don't think that I'll be rewatching it every 2 years anymore, maybe like every 5 years. I mean, conceptually, it's a horrifying film. It's just not quite as good as I remember. So let's now transition to my new watches of old horror. We have some fun ones here. First up would be Death Bell, a South Korean horror movie also from the early 2000s. Trapped by a maniac, students and teachers must solve riddles and puzzles to stay alive. On Letterboxd, I said that it's like if Saw were kind of bad, but in a good way. In a critical sense, the movie's pretty bad, yes, but it's in a way that I really enjoy. Early 2000s cheesiness is better than the cheesiness of literally any other decade, and this movie is littered with it. Ironically, even though technically the movie is really over the top and flashy with that weird early 2000s editing, the acting is surprisingly good and grounded. Plus the story is really great, and I would have rated the movie even higher if the first 2 acts were as strong as the third, because I was most excited for the riddles and puzzles in the movie, but that ended up kind of being the most incoherent thing about it. They completely take a backseat to the character drama, which I don't mind, but it just kind of took me by surprise. It's just the traps and riddles in things like Saw and Cube are so well thought out, you would think that they would kind of be a higher point of this movie. I recommend it though. I think the twists and turns more than make up for the moments that drag. Though this one is definitely for my early 2000s fans. If you like gore and goofy editing, then this one is gonna be right up your alley. Next up would be Under the Skin, a 2013 Scarlett Johansson film. Disguising itself as a human woman, an extraterrestrial drives around Scotland luring unsuspecting men into its van. Thanks, I hated it. I gave this movie 1 star. Y'all have lost your minds if you think I'm gonna sit here and be like, well, it wasn't for me, but I get why it's a critical darling. Because I don't. Nothing happens. I prefer for my movies to have things like, oh, you know, a plot. This movie is so unserious. I don't think for a second that some critics aren't talking out of their asses praising this as some brilliant film. Some of y'all are just scared of looking stupid. Not me. I get on this website every week and act like an idiot. So I have no problem saying this movie is incoherent, boring mess. Maybe you'll watch it and discover some new meaning of what it is to be human or something. That's great. I think it's stupid and they shouldn't have cast Black Widow. Moving on, I finally started getting into the Hellraiser sequels, or only the first one, but then also like the remake. That was for my comparison video though, that you may or may not have already seen. And hopefully a deep dive and ranking of that entire franchise is coming, if not this month, then in January. Now I also watched a ton of Tim Burton films, but I'm not going to talk about those until my Tim Burton deep dive, which is coming probably at the end of this month. So moving on to new releases, we'll kick it off with Deep Fear. Okay, now we'll kick it off with Deep Fear. 3 freshly graduated students decide to explore the catacombs of Paris. I'll level with you, I didn't bother finishing this movie. It could be good, but I'm not sure because I was just so turned off by the subject matter. I was thinking, ooh, it'll be a fun French version of As Above, So Below. But no, not quite, babes. So I will say this, if you enjoy horror movies where one of the main horror elements is then this is one of your better options. What lovely timing I'm having reviewing this film. On that note, fuck Kanye West, fuck you, fuck you. It's really important right now that if you have a platform of any size, I don't care, 10 followers, 10 million, you need to speak out against this bullshit. We saw this happen recently in the past few years with just the existence of trans people, and now because of Kanye West, all of a sudden, there's a conversation to be had about Jewish people. Fuck you? fuck you. Now back to Deep Fear, that content definitely has its time and place for sure. It's just not something that I love subjecting myself to. As you can tell, I see enough of that in real life living in America. I don't really need it in my movies too. But I'm glad it exists for the people that clearly need to see it. I can't share too much because I didn't finish it, that just wouldn't be fair. But I did finish Deadstream, so let's talk about that now. Deadstream follows a disgraced internet personality as he tries to survive the night in an abandoned haunted house. I thought this movie started off pretty strong. It seems like they're making pretty blatant commentary on J Station. If you don't know who he is, I would recommend watching, I think it was Drew Gooden who kind of covered his whole situation. He breaks it all down in a very consumable way. Long story short, he's incredibly problematic. He pretended to have a 3 a.m. phone call with the ghost of Mac Miller, and he told his entire child audience that his girlfriend died for views. Sick in the head. I believe at one point he had been demonetized and he lost one of his channels entirely, so I'm pretty sure the character in this movie is meant to represent him. I think he does a great job of that. However, when the horror starts to get cranked up, I'm not really a fan of the acting there. Initially I was like, yeah, the beefed up goofy acting definitely works for this character, especially because that's definitely how a lot of YouTubers are. But when the horror starts, the acting doesn't really change. Like, it doesn't ever come through for me that this guy is actually scared of what's happening to him. Like I said, I enjoyed the beginning a lot. I thought that the humor was surprisingly in tune with the times. You know, making jokes about YouTubers who have been canceled or, you know, rightfully held responsible for their bad actions and all their dumb sponsorships, things like that. Like, whoever made this movie clearly has a really good grip on internet culture, like a really good grip. However, I've seen a lot of people make this comparison and I'm going to as well because it's very accurate, but this movie feels so much like Evil Dead, it might as well be a sequel to it. So it's fun if you like Evil Dead. I just don't happen to be an Evil Dead kind of girl. Though I love dark comedy, don't get me wrong. The problem with this movie though is that it's just insanely repetitive, so it doesn't ever feel like that much happens. The backstory that unravels about this haunted house is not anything new, it's not unique or refreshing. As a concept, I really like the movie. I'm glad that the Evil Dead fans have this one, it's just not for me. Moving on, House of Darkness is up next. After meeting at a local bar, a man accompanies a beautiful and mysterious woman back to her luxurious and secluded estate. However, he soon gets more than he bargained for when their playful flirtation turns into something sinister. Fun fact, this movie apparently came out the same day as Barbarian, and Justin Long is kind of playing the same character in both movies. Fair warning, this is a slow burn, alright? Believe me when I say this movie is about 95% dialogue. The dialogue is really good and engaging, but nothing of visual interest almost ever happens. Save for 2 scenes. Yeah, 2. It's also highly predictable, but I feel like the actors carried, and honestly, I was pretty engaged. The whole movie just consists of Mina unraveling Hap's really misogynistic attitudes, and then there is a very predictable twist you could probably see coming from about 12 miles away. I only recommend this movie if you love Justin Long the way that I do, and you don't mind a movie that consists mainly just of dialogue. I cannot stress that enough, okay? It really feels more like a play.
You guys? Hi, yeah, it's me, Editing Kylie. I'm here to doodly doodly dee. Oh, that edible's starting to hit me. Oop. I cannot believe that I forgot to talk about Bones and All. This movie, oh my god. This movie doesn't have a lot of plot. It's a little slice of life romance tale about these 2 cannibals. I get why it's a critical darling because the cannibalism is an allegory for basically things like addiction. You know, it's kind of about our choice whether or not to break free of abusive cycles passed down from our parents. So I get why it's a critical darling, but I prefer to have a little more plot. I prefer my movies not so depressing, and it was just gross. Like, I just straight up did not have a good time, and I wanted to tell you a little story about this movie because I went to go see it with my dad, and I think I forgot to talk about it in the video because we did talk about it on a live stream too, but we went to go see the movie together because I told him I was really excited to go see it, and he was like, yeah, okay, I'll go see it with you, because he's just so much more open and willing. The Matt that you know today, my goodness, I mean, 2 years ago, he never ever would have gone to go see a movie like Bones and All. And I think it's so cute because you can go back and kind of watch his growth too from the beginning of my channel to now. Anyways, we were, I think, about halfway through the movie and we were just having a terrible time at the theater. There were only 2 other women in our theater at our showtime. So my dad leans over to me and he starts to get up. He's like, I'm gonna go get a beer. And I was like, get me one. So he comes back and he has the beers and, you know, I take a long swig and I'm like, you know what? When we finish these, we can walk out if you want to. And my dad was the one that was like, no, we're gonna do it. We are gonna stay and we're gonna watch Bones and All. Just beyond madness to think about that. So he ended up giving the movie a half star. I gave it 2 stars. But on Letterboxd, I did say, aw, the cannibals have their twilight now. That feels apt, and that feels like all the words that I want to say about Bones and All. Thank you. Bye.
So let's switch up the tune. The new Hellraiser movie came out a couple months ago, so I finally got to it for my comparison video, as I mentioned. So go watch that video if you haven't already. The new Hellraiser follows Riley as her brother seems to go missing. She finds there may be a connection to this mysterious box and opens herself up to a whole new world. I've shared many thoughts on this movie already, obviously, but there are just some things that I feel like I really need to stress. I just feel like it lacked the most critical components that made the original movie successful. One of the main problems that I feel like I didn't ever really stress is just that the new reboot feels so painfully conventional, when if you look at the legacy of the original, that movie is still very, very shocking and unlike anything else to this day. So maybe it's unfair to even compare them that way because it was destined to fail, but it just seems so crazy to me that they wouldn't try to do something really balls to the wall and go out there and swing for the walls with a reboot. It was just so unbelievably timid. I think that's my main gripe with it. Someone left a really good comment on that video though, and I just wanted to read out part of it. This film had a duty to attempt the transgressive and to address taboos, even if they're the same taboos repackaged. It didn't even try. Like, nothing about the new movie felt taboo or icky in the right ways at all. I'm just still very disappointed by it, if you couldn't tell. Especially because it was directed by David Bruckner, who did The Lighthouse, which I think is an incredible film. Though that one still was not the whole package for me. Maybe it is kind of telling that I thought that the end of that film didn't quite wrap a bow on that movie very well. In any case, I think I'll be done talking about Hellraiser for now. Finally, I watched The Menu, but this was a very, very special movie, one of my favorite releases of the year, and so it got its own review. Side note, if you're still around, give me some feedback on how you feel about solo reviews, because I thought that they would be a more popular thing to do, but they typically have a little bit lower engagement on my channel for whatever reason. And maybe it's just because you guys really love the comparison videos, so I should stick to that more. I don't know, let me know. But a lot of people were excited for that video, and I think that for the movies that I think deserve solo reviews, I'm still gonna do it, but maybe I'll only do like one a month, one every other month or something. But that to say, I did a really thorough kind of breakdown of that movie, so I don't have any other thoughts here. Other new releases that I want to prioritize watching this month are Dead to Me Season 3, Speak No Evil, and Violent Night, which I actually did watch last night. Check Patreon for exclusive content on that, and by the way, a shout out to all these people, my lovely patrons. These lovely people have probably already seen my thoughts on Violent Night. If you're interested in that, over on Patreon, you usually get about 4 to 6 bonus content videos every month, so if you want to join the crew, the link for that is down below. If that's not for you, the rest of my social media is linked down below as well, so go crazy, go stupid over there. Other than that, I hope that you enjoyed. Happy holidays, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye! Yay! Yay! We did it! We did it! We filmed a video!